that conundrum because they don't want you to make claims. And it's what I want to say is, we've had some incredible reversals of diseases. That's the best way to word it. And the minute you tell someone who's not in functional medicine, they're almost screaming liar, and you just ignore it. Like, that's okay. You don't have to agree with me, but the proof is in the results. And my job is to educate, advise, and go over risk versus benefits. And of course, they say first, do no harm.
2, 1, 0.
Hi, and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. This is your host, Orion. Thank you so much for being here. If you are here today, you are curious about anti-aging, you are curious about balancing your hormones, and maybe even reversing your age and just having the best life and the most energy. And therefore, I have the wonderful Dr. Rajka. Dr. Rajka is a leading functional medicine MD, an international speaker, a mentor to practitioners, and an expert in longevity, anti-aging, and nutrigenics. She has helped thousands of high-performance executives, entrepreneurs, and celebrities recover their energy and perform so they can have the biggest impact in their life. She is known as the go-to doctor for other doctors. She sees patients one-on-one in the clinic she founded, Simply Health Institute, outside of Chicago. So you're in for a treat. I hope you will enjoy it as much as I did. And now, without further ado, on to the show. Hello, Dr. Rajka. Welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. I am so happy that you're here because from the little I know about you, you are phenomenal. And we're going to learn so much about anti-aging, about peptides, about everything that is cutting edge when it comes to anti-aging with you. So I'm mega thrilled. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Orion, for having me. I love other women who spread the word so that the more we can educate, the more we can empower women going forward so they can live their best lives.
Yes. You're doing things that other doctors don't do. You keep expanding, educating yourself. You described yourself as someone that learned from anyone under the sun. Tell me a little bit about your origin story and how did you find your passion and why do you seek so much, and why do you it's almost like you have this natural curiosity to learn more and to piece different information together. You don't go with your blinders on, but you're very open to learn.
Absolutely. So, when I was a little girl, I had three dreams. One was to be a doctor, one was to go on to have my own family, and the third dream was to cure just about everyone and anyone, right? And these dreams were almost not actualized because, like many of us in the functional medicine field, we have our own health journeys. And in my 20s, I was just so undeniably fatigued. And the story that I always hear with patients, I became one of those people, is I felt so bad. My numbers were quote unquote normal. And how many people listening to this have been told nothing's wrong, or it's a normal part of aging, or worse, you've been given an antidepressant. And I thought, I'm not going to go to the doctor. What are they going to say? Like, I have the knowledge that I have. And pretty soon within practice, I just realized I'm not curing anyone. And there was, in my very first practice, I did deliveries and took care of the infant, the baby when it was born, did the exam, even if they went into the special care nursery, did that, pediatric admissions, adult, in the office, so many procedures like ultrasound, biopsies, and colon cancer screening. And I felt like really we're doing it all, but seemingly I thought I'm not curing anyone. And I was up north of Seattle, Washington, this beautiful city I was living in that overlooked the Puget Sound. And this woman walked out of the appointment, and as her friend asked her, well, what's wrong with you? And she's like, that darn doctor doesn't know. I'm like, so first you're shocked, but then you're like, I don't want to be that darn doctor who doesn't want to know. I want to know. So pretty quickly I realized that there's something missing here. But it took me, that would have been in 1997 when I first came out. And then I didn't find functional medicine until 2012. So that's quite a long journey. And I had looked at doing integrative medicine training. Andrew Weil launched his first program right about the time I finished. Huge issues with that because, like, you either went there and you were paid a really meager salary, which would not have even covered my medical school loans, or you paid them, $15,000 a year. I just had that you can't squeeze water out of a rock when, I'm just coming out of residency, broke and with no funds. And I thought so I kept putting it off, but it's okay because I found functional medicine in the end of it. But to make a long story short, I went on to develop all these from the foundation of fatigue, all these symptoms and diagnoses: Hashimoto's thyroiditis, infertility, endometriosis, PMS. I lost my vision with the very first ever migraine I had. I thought I had a stroke. I was actually pregnant at the time, living in a foreign country. So it was,
Which country?
We were in Qatar in the Middle East.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I knew that they wouldn't image me. They were really like, they had this saying, haram, and they wouldn't image you.
Oh, no.
Because they don't want to do no harm. And like I saw them, this is back in the day. Their medical system has advanced. They've really worked hard and they brought in some top-notch people to learn from. And so I can't comment today, but back then they were, taking pregnant, because I practiced there. And we went there. My husband was recruited for a very specific job there. And so we went as an adventure. He's a nomad by birth, a native New Zealander. And so he promised me we'd live abroad. And it was very fruitful. It was just such a lovely experience to have, very just enriching, and met so many people from all over the world. But at any rate, they took pregnant women off of asthma medications because they thought it would cause harm. But it's like, well, the mom has to breathe. And so they had just a different approach. But I thought, oh, wow, what am I going to do? What if I am having, a stroke? I can't even get imaged here. At the end of the day, I have friends all over the world. I called one up and he says, this was light induced, migraine. Don't worry about it. And he shared a story where he was a neurosurgeon that I trained with, and he said, don't worry, I actually had it happen to me. And then I started doing research. But still, why was this happening? And what was sad was, yes, they diagnosed Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I found an endocrinologist who kind of thought outside of the box. Yes, I was put on medication, but that was like a Band-Aid, because what should have been explored was what led to that. And that root cause, and it took me a decade of, at the end of the day, I went along and, there's nothing more than heartbreaking. I'm falling asleep standing up. And I always joke and say, can you imagine my love life? You know how many guys want to go out with you and you fall asleep on the first date? And, I went on to marry someone because I stayed awake for 2 dates. But then, right away, I know, is that funny? Right away, infertility and, how heartbreaking that I'm delivering babies myself. And, I always try to have that upper chin. And there was this defining moment. This woman came in and was pregnant for the 8th time, 6 of her 7 kids taken away because she had a drug addiction. She did clean up herself. And I said, how is this? Why can't I get pregnant? And this woman's now pregnant for the 8th time.
Wow.
And that was neither here nor there, but I was just heartbroken about it. And we went on. I started studying. We got pregnant twice naturally after many failed attempts. But the ultimate defining moment, here we were on this celebratory trip after being in the Middle East for 8 years. And, it's so funny to say, oh, we went to Sri Lanka for spring break, but, it was a 4-hour flight. So it wasn't, like from here, it'd be forever and a day. Beautiful country, by the way. And our kids were jumping in and out of the pool and screaming, they're 5, 4 and 8, and watch me, mama. And at the time, my liver was failing. And I thought,
oh my goodness,
this is how it ends. Like, I'm going to leave these kids behind that I've fought so hard to learn medicine where I can really help people. And what happened was, it took a long time even after that to figure out what actually led to that. But they were entertaining a second, or would have been a third, autoimmune disease because I had asthma, or fourth probably, asthma, allergies, eczema, all of it, infertility, endometriosis, all of that. Hashimoto's has this origin in being autoimmune. And
you've been through a lot.
Yep. And I laugh and I tell people, so what happened was, that's when I was actually transitioning to functional medicine. And I had a mentor. I hadn't started work in the field. I'd started training. Yeah, and so I found functional medicine right at the time of where my liver enzymes were 5 times normal. I really did feel that bad. And just with a basic approach, so we didn't do anything fancy. I had a practitioner lead me through a traditional approach, and my liver enzymes normalized. I never ended up with that diagnosis of autoimmune hepatitis. And just to put that into perspective, if someone ends up with autoimmune hepatitis and they do not take steroid medications daily, the risk of dying at 3 to 5 years is 50%. It's pretty high mortality rate, so death rate. But so it was really eye opening. So it was like all this suffering. I'm like, I just want to prevent needless suffering. And now I'm proud to say, with what was at the crux of that, there were some genetic variations that were an issue, but it was really hormonal imbalances too that were never uncovered. There were so many different imbalances. But I joke and say, well, I had every other issue leading up until perimenopause, and now I've sailed not only through perimenopause, but menopause, and I am so happy to have done so. And now I can lead other women and prevent it. And I say, whatever's happening in you, you're going to see in your daughter too. So unless you're addressing it in both of you. So the same thing that led to all my symptoms, probably if we didn't live healthy or whatever, would lead to similar things in my own daughter.
Wow. So what do we need to do to prevent it in our daughters? Like, how do we catch it right away?
Yeah, yeah. So the typical thing you see, even from that adolescent age, the typical imbalance is that there's a disproportionate balance between estrogen and progesterone. And we call that estrogen dominance. And it is manifest by painful periods initially, PMS, mood swings. It can be heavy bleeding, uterine fibroids, but you name it. And so this young lady, they're taken into the doctor, and the doctor puts them on an oral contraceptive. But oral contraception gives you estrogen and progesterone, and sure, it regulates it, but it's a band-aid. It's not treating the underlying cause. So, I have I talk about removing the 8 triggers for inflammation and doing it in the right order. So I have a 3D protocol, but I always say it's actually more than 3D. It's multidimensional. So there's actually 3 S's and 3 M's. And just foundationally, from a dietary standpoint, is eating things that will balance hormones, incorporating more cruciferous vegetables, drinking green tea, unless they're young and you don't want them to get that caffeine. And then from a digestive standpoint, believe it or not, if you have an imbalance in bacteria, bacteria can produce an enzyme that does not allow us to break down estrogen. And so instead of when we make it, we break it down, break it down. If you don't excrete it out of the body, so sweating or peeing or eliminating by having a bowel movement, and a bacteria can cause that to happen, you'll have a higher level of estrogen. The other way we're seeing it in young girls is all these beauty products that have components or chemicals in there that act like estrogen. We call those xenoestrogens. So that just further tips the scale. So, we walk them through that, and from a dietary standpoint, supporting the nutrients, so that's vitamins and minerals. And if you want to support progesterone, you can use supplements. So not even using full-blown hormones to support it, because unfortunately the oral contraceptive pill depletes B vitamins, so it adds further to those mood swings. So what we're trying to accomplish, we're actually adding fuel to the fire.
Right. How great are vitamins and supplements for our body? Are all of them good? Do we need to be very discerning with what we take?
Yeah, let's start with foundationally, I think there's 4 or 5 that everyone, I call them the core 4 or 5, should be on, because regardless of that, if you're eating a healthy diet and hitting all the parameters, we've long known that the soil is depleted of nutrients here in the United States. In fact, back in the 30s or 40s, the U.S. Senate issued a warning telling Americans that they should supplement with the multivitamin. Our soils deplete. And so if you don't rotate crops, et cetera, you can get these depletions. And there's certain areas where zinc is really low, and they say no zinc, no think is one thing. And of course, it's important for immune function and preventing infections like colds. So when I'm testing, so I always test, and you can do it through a basic blood panel at your local lab, or you can do a more specific blood panel where they look at a 3-month average of vitamins and minerals or your nutrients. And when you're testing, what I used to see was 3 to 5 vitamin and mineral deficiencies in most adults. Now it's kind of jumped 5 to 7 in adults, sometimes higher, and 20 and under crowd. Yeah, 20 and under, get this, 15 to 20 vitamin and mineral deficiencies because they're eating the brown diet, the carbs, the pasta, the gluten, or I'm not gluten free. We wish they're gluten free. The chicken nuggets, the pizza, there's no variety there. They're not getting their nutrients from their foods. And it's amazing what happens when you give someone the vitamins and minerals they need and you replete them, that they're like, wow, all kinds of things start happening. Their symptoms go away, their energy goes up, maybe they're sleeping better. Because remember, all our chemical pathways in our body are governed by vitamins and minerals. So by these, we call them cofactors. So the core four, in case you were wondering, I always say a multivitamin mineral, some sort of vitamin D, typically in kids 1 to 2,000, adults 5 to 10,000. Typically I'm saying no less than 5,000, sometimes less. And I always say you want to measure levels. A good probiotic, and then fish oil, so omega-3 fatty acids. I actually measure omega-3 indexes, and the value you want is 8, and I'm seeing adults come in at 2.4. And the significance is, A, it supports immune function, number one. B, it supports, the DHA, for brain health, so to have your brain functioning. And 3, there was a study that showed that a level of 8.0 or higher reduced our risk of death and dying from any cause. So that means heart attack, stroke, cancer. So there's all this incentive. Let's be up at 8. And almost no one that I've measured has achieved it with diet alone. So I haven't seen it. And there's only been a few people who have come in with that level, and usually they are supplementing. So so I say both. Yeah.
So what about magnesium? That's usually
Yep.
a
Oh,
big
that's the fifth. That's the fifth. Magnesium
yeah.
is definitely up there. And other common ones I'm seeing. So those are your core four. The fifth would be magnesium. Most need magnesium. The other ones that crop up are zinc, B12, and then B9, which is folate. Those are other ones that are commonly. And I've started measuring I measure all the nutrients that are important for thyroid function. And, a perfect case example was a mother came in with their son, said, hey, I don't want my son to develop Hashimoto's thyroiditis. The kid was 9, right? He actually looked like he had subtle hypothyroidism. We found he
What
had
do you mean look like? How do you see that in people?
lab values. So he didn't feel bad.
They don't see it on their face.
No, not usually if that you're on. But so we measured zinc levels, and he was totally deficient. Now, zinc, if it's deficient, can affect and lower thyroid function by 75%.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, so we simply replaced his zinc. And remember, for immune function, Hashimoto's is an autoimmune condition. And we reversed all those numbers. He had a low level of antibodies present. I mean, we do more. So it's more than just zinc. We talk about diet. We talk about nutrients. We talk about what makes a healthy microbiome. That's my second D in digestion. We talk about how do we naturally detoxify? What do we do to support detox? And unfortunately, the longer we've been around on this earth, the more we're exposed to and accumulate that. And we call that the expososome. So it's the total burden that we've been exposed to and then now is stored in our tissues.
So you said anyone that has been living over, I guess, 2 decades need to detox because we are exposed to lots of things that we shouldn't have been exposed to, chemicals, even the sprays in the sky, everything. Like, we are bombarded. So what kind of detox is good, and what type of detoxes do you do?
That's a good question. I'll tell you what I don't do. So someone who's not healthy, juice cleanses can make someone very, very sick. So when you detoxify, break it down from the toxin into a more toxic metabolite or breakdown product, and you got to make that a water-loving molecule so you can sweat it out, pee it out, or eliminate it through a bowel movement. When you don't have protein on board, you can't do that second step. So it gets stuck in the body.
Wow.
Yeah, and so people get really sick because of this. You can do it the healthier you are. I've done 2, 3, 4 day juice cleanses. I feel amazing. But, I've been at this a decade. So I've been at healthy living and know the parameters. Before that, I thought I was healthy living. But remember in the 1990s, the low-fat diet was all the craze. And that was the worst diet on the planet. So we start with the basics, hydrating, ensuring that you're having bowel movements once a day, dry brushing, these are all great. Sweating, so exercising to get to the sweat. Unfortunately, people who are really sick and have been exposed to various toxins may not sweat in the early days. A couple different ways. In the early days, I was always cost conscious for my patients, and I have really kind of progressed to, if I'm given the choice, there's so many ways to test for environmental toxins, mold toxins, heavy metals. I'll test if a patient is up to it. And here's what I've found is people who are living healthy, filter their water, eat all organic, you'd be shocked at what comes up. And that way you know how to avoid and what to eliminate. And so there are products I'll use that have humic and fulvic acid that eliminate a lot of those environmental toxins. And things that come up commonly that people don't know about is there's a gasoline byproduct in most water supplies, not all, but most, called MTBE that crops up even if someone's using a filter. And those Berkey filters are not good enough, and definitely not your Brita. That's not going to filter it out.
I'm actually having a Life Spring water right now. It delivers it's from a spring in Alabama. It's being delivered to Miami where I am, in glass bottles and being tested every week or I don't know when. So it's really high quality water, and I think it's important to invest in maybe reverse osmosis or something really, really good. Even though I know you have to remineralize reverse osmosis, right? And add some minerals to the water. Because we are, 90% water or 75% or whatever. We are mostly water. So whatever is in the water is going to be our health and who we are, right?
Yeah.
So cheers.
Yeah, cheers. And so in this little Yeti mug, I have glass bottled Hinkley Springs water. So we're of the same vein.
Yes, that's
And
awesome.
then, we have data so far. There is a website, Clearly Filtered, which creates pictures and under sink filters that might be like, say, yeah, and they when I was researching it says they remove like 99 point some percent of MTBE and a lot of the other toxins. So I have yet to split test it, but we have a picture at home, we have a picture at work, just so that we're double filtering it. And I want to grab a sample and send it off. I haven't had a chance to do that, just to confirm, because that's one of the fun things we get to do, right, as practitioners is what I tell people, I'm like, it's pretty cool. I try things out on myself first before I subject patients to say, hey, is it worth it? Would I do this? And if it is, then we incorporate it into our protocols.
Yes. So if not juice fasting, what kind of detoxes are out there or the ones that are your favorite? I'm sure, I mean, of course, everyone need to test.
Yeah, so a couple different things is they have these detoxes in the box. There's a couple companies that make them where they have you eat food, real food, and but it's clean food. So you're eliminating the big, 5 to 10 kind of inflammatory foods, gluten, dairy, sugar, soy. Some have you remove caffeine. I'm not as much of a stickler on the caffeine unless you're doing non-organic coffee because the coffee can be moldy. And then they supply you with, typically you're adding in the protein shakes, and then they're giving you detox packs. So think of amino acids and then various liver support supplements like N-acetylcysteine and milk thistles. So I say those little kits work, fabulously. And so that's a great when you want to just do more. And I'd say, hey, everyone probably should do one once, maybe twice a year, but best is doing what you're doing every day to detox. So eating healthy, supplementing, measuring your vitamin and mineral levels, and believe it or not, just even toxic people. So we got to think about that. Toxic
I like
relationships.
that.
Yeah, toxic work environments, and you want to be striving to, sometimes you can't change the situation, but you'd certainly change that perception of it.
Right. And sometimes you don't want to cut people out of your life completely, but maybe just be kind of prepared when you're near them and have minimal interactions. People are still good people, even though sometimes their behavior is toxic, but you pretty much train people to treat you a certain way. And when you take responsibility, you put boundaries on and you limit exposure, I guess it can be beneficial because I feel like if I would eliminate all the people that are had some behavioral issues that I don't love in my life, I would be left with no one. So it's a fine line.
I'm chuckling. I do love your strategy. That's an excellent strategy. Is you can control and set boundaries and limit set. And one of the things I do is I'm trained in high performance coaching, and they talk about you got to teach people how to act, and you model the way. And we have really lovely relationships with all of our patients because we teach them how to get their needs met and what works and what doesn't. And, periodically I've had to have hard conversations and say, hey, I'd love to work with you. But remember in the beginning, I said, this only works if it's a mutually respectful relationship that's collaborative. Yeah, oh yeah, that we say that in the very first visit. These are the criteria that have to be met. You have to want to this type of change in medicine and approach. Once in a great while, you get someone who comes in, yes, 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 I want functional medicine, and like 2, 3 visits in, they're like, well, what's my diagnosis? I'm like, you missed the whole point. I'm not going to give you the diagnosis. In some instances is important. Obviously, you want to know if they have cancer or not or whatever. But we're looking at removing the triggers for inflammation. So those are your causes of that symptoms that are that end up as a disease process to restore balance more than we're looking at throwing a label at something.
Right. So we're detoxing because inflammation is probably the biggest factor for disease, right?
Yep, and that's toxins are just one of the 8 triggers, yep, for inflammation.
Okay. You're very good with peptides. What are peptides? What is peptide therapy?
Yeah. So peptides, the best way to explain it, so everyone knows what protein is. That's what we eat, right? So peptides are a breakdown product of protein, so amino acids, but they're short sequences. And so for all intents and purposes, 50 or less amino acids in a series, whereas a protein that you eat is 150. And our body, we naturally create over 7,000 peptides. And the one that everyone knows is insulin. Insulin is a peptide. As we age, the number decreases, like with everything. So you want to support it, or you can support it. Now, there are some that are even FDA approved for conditions and symptoms. And I like to liken it as that they're messengers. So they're communicating to get better function out of your cells. And while we can't say they treat any one disease process.
It's just a little caveat. Like you can say like all the good things that are treating people, you can say that they are treating people.
Yes, and that's that conundrum because they don't want you to make claims. And it's what I want to say is, we've had some incredible reversals of diseases. That's the best way to word it. And the minute you tell someone who's not in functional medicine, they're almost screaming, liar, and you just ignore it. Like, that's okay. You don't have to agree with me, but the proof is in the results. And my job is to educate, advise, and go over risk versus benefits. And of course, they say first, do no harm. So with peptides, here's some of the things we've seen. Improve recovery from surgery, improve recovery from an acute injury, improve recovery from exercise. So as we age, sometimes we don't recover as quick as we did when we were 20s. Improved libido, a little bit better sleep. And they're not the end all be all. However, I really am intrigued and feel that they are. So this is an opinion. They're going to change the way we age. And it is just one tool in my toolbox, but I think it's an important one. Some of them are oral, some of them are nasal sprays, and some of them are injectable. And
Crazy. That sounds
very,
really
yeah,
futuristic.
yeah. And so the beauty of it is that you can turn them on and off. You can use them, and if you stop, you don't get, so hormone therapy is a discussion. And I think that women should be aware of it. And I feel that when that study came back out, when I first came out into private practice, the Women's Health Initiative, it did a huge disservice to women. We just stripped all these women off hormones, no questions asked. And they only studied synthetic hormones And at the end of the day, straight out estrogen didn't cause breast cancer. It was a combination of synthetic estrogen and synthetic progesterone. And in my world, we use bioidentical. So you need to be consulted on risk versus benefits. But if we start someone,
When they do IVF, do they use synthetic or bioidentical?
I know for progesterone, I believe that's synthetic for the
Hmm.
progesterone. And I know,
I'm just like, great. I had IVF on for. I'm like, oh, I'm sure I got injected with a lot of synthetic hormones.
yeah, yeah. A lot of times they induce like a mini menopause and then they jumpstart you to ovulate and then they support progesterone. And so I know the progesterone is definitely synthetic. And so, but say that someone didn't want to do hormones. Peptides are a way to help support natural production, even into menopause, so it can boost those levels. And yeah, the results we're getting are just nothing shy of amazing. I've had a couple people there's a peptide called body protection compound 157. The interesting story is that it was the propeptide to that was discovered by Pavlov. Remember Pavlov, who did the experiment on dogs and salivating? He was actually studying their digestive tracts. And I've had a couple people develop refractory reflux and just couldn't get them better. And we added that in, and it takes a little while. And for that one, when it's your esophagus, we have to open it up and they put it in water and drink it down, and it really targets that area. And we've gotten really nice full resolution in one patient, and significant improvement in the other who couldn't even go out to eat. He was just not intolerant of stuff. And sadly, his reflux was all induced by a prescription strength anti-inflammatory. So, because what happens is that it loosens or lowers the lower esophageal sphincter tone, and then you get the reflux. And he couldn't get that to stop. And they do a scope and they'd say, oh, you got a mild esophagitis. It doesn't explain the symptoms. And, he's told to go away. And that's terrible. Like, it's a terrible way to live because he was quite young. And so, yeah, it really has helped. And I'm utilizing it now pre and post operatively, and I'll keep you posted. So I haven't had enough data, but yeah, it's just exploded, being able to support people. And again, it's not for everyone. And people are going to say, what is this about? But some of the data is looking very, very promising.
That's amazing. I know that I had my husband got me a supplement. It's a peptide, and it's supposed to help me, and I have to take it. Anyways, that's amazing. But someone will need to come to you and do the lab tests, and then you'll determine what they need.
Yeah, yeah. I always tell people the protocols are individualized to everyone. After a decade in functional medicine and more than 2.5 decades in traditional medicine or medicine total, is that, I've developed this proprietary process because I'm like, how do we get our results so I can like name it and describe to people what is the journey they're going to take, and ensure that we do the right steps in the right order. So if you do them out of order, we've seen people come from who have seen multiple practitioners, and the best case scenario is they just didn't get better. The worst is they were made to feel worse. Remember when I said if you're detoxing someone who isn't even nourished and doesn't have amino acids and vitamins and minerals, they can feel terrible. And the sicker you are, if you don't do it in the right order, you really can tank someone. So it's really identifying what are their triggers. So it's going to differ, taking them through the right steps in the right order, supporting them along the way. And then the key piece that I think we're targeting and supporting even further is that we've recovered a lot of people and we've told them when they need to follow up and they're not seen. And then what we see is they come in 5 years later worse than ever. So I always tell people, can you imagine not going to the dentist after a few times? Like, what would happen if you didn't go to your dentist for 5 years? And best case scenario, you have a couple cavities, but worse, what if that just is a setup. So it's like, and I'd say even the healthiest person twice a year to be seen, at least a full set of labs. And then, then to be advised on what's new and emerging and up and coming, because what I did 10 years ago is so different than what I do today in functional medicine.
I'm sure. And do you work remotely? Can people that you're in Chicago, right?
I'm right outside of Chicago, pretty close to O'Hare Airport. We have plenty of people that travel. As an MD, they do require us to see everyone in person once, and I'm hopeful that will change. So we see them once and then we can follow them virtually, which is super beneficial. And yeah, right after the pandemic, I had people flying in from Puerto Rico and all across the US, and it was just incredible. I'm like, wow, I'm humbled, but also grateful to get to meet people from all over the globe. And, because we lived as expats, I'll have expats that come home for the summer and they'll fly to see me and then they return because, they like the approach that we have and you can follow them. And with Zoom now, I'm really hopeful these laws will change. I do have multi-state licenses, but I've kind of just limited to Illinois and then everyone else comes in. But we are launching, we have one virtual program that we have. It's exclusive to women and it's a complete reset for women called the She Reset. So we do that one and it really is like the path of least resistance. It gets them the most bang for the buck within a 6-week time period with no labs, fully supported, teaches them how to eat for life. And, one of my strengths is nutrigenetics. So on reintroduction, we have training videos and the health coach supports them. So my health coach runs the whole program now, but we've launched that in group format, super powerful. So more are coming. So we are on the verge of, in the fall, there'll be more things coming that don't require me to see a patient. So
That's awesome. What is autophagy? You mentioned that before when we had our conversation prior to the show, the recording. What is it? Why do we need to know about it?
yeah, what you need to know is I always tell people, when it comes to aging starts, the minute you're conceived. And sadly, I think most people should have screening labs in their 20s. And if we're going to do anything to support healthy aging, I always tell people you want your health span to equal your lifespan. So when you're 80, you can get up off the floor. And in fact, we have a test called the Get Up and Go test, and you measure how quickly, a senior can stand up and walk so many feet and walk back. And if it just can impact quality of life. So autophagy is important in aging because it is a natural phenomenon of house cleaning for our cells. So think about you clean your house periodically, right? And if you don't, it gets cluttered. You might trip over things and things don't function as efficiently. You can't find anything, etc. And so it'll naturally occur, and as we age, right around 40, and remember everyone's 40 is different. If you lived a healthier life, it might be 42 or 45. If you lived unhealthy, it may happen sooner. When that stops, decreases, there's things we can do from a lifestyle standpoint to support that, and people should know about those cells that aren't having cellular cleaning happen can become what we call sleeper cells. And sleeper cells have the name of senescent cells. And why that's important is senescent cells release inflammatory chemicals. And remember, all symptoms in disease are due to inflammation at the start. And then they are also referred to as zombie cells. So they recruit healthy cells that have no issues into becoming more sleeper cells. So you're constantly thinking, when I think of aging, is you want to support autophagy, and you want to do something to kind of kill off those senescent cells, so to speak.
Awesome. I have a lot to talk to you about, but our time is coming to an end. Before we say goodbye for now, what are your 3 top tips to living a stellar life, and where can people find you?
Yeah, my goodness. Only 3, right, Orion?
Yeah, you have a million, but yeah, 3 for now. Just the first 3 that come up.
Yeah, I would say if you want a healthy age is to, in minimum start at 40 and be tested. So you can test how quickly and how poorly someone's aging, and, talk to a practitioner on what are natural ways to support autophagy and senolytics that you could potentially use, because there's so many of them that really, everything from diet, lifestyle, number 1. Number 2 is, nutrition is always at the start of everything. So it's foundationally my first D is, most people, especially women, what we're getting wrong is not enough protein, right? Not enough protein. The top 3 within nutrition is not enough protein, I'm telling people 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight of protein per day. That's a lot more than most people are getting to maintain muscle mass. 2 is diversity. So if we don't have diverse diets, it'll affect your immune system and your mental health, because diversity allows the bacteria in our bodies to chomp on these foods and release something called short chain fatty acids, and that fuels us. And then I would say the last one is test, don't guess. At a minimum, do a nutrient panel, look to the toxins, because you'd be surprised at the deficiencies or abnormalities you will find, even when you feel well. And I've proven this time and time again. People who feel well, the most common thing we get everything from health optimization to very, very sick people, is that we will work with them, find their deficiencies, remove the triggers, and they'll say, wow, I didn't realize I could feel this well. And they had no complaints on arrival.
Awesome. And where can people find you and work with you?
Yeah, so my website's drrajka.com. I'm sure you'll have a link. We invite people who are considering to work with us to, fill out an application. It's got to be a mutual great fit. And then we talk to them. If it is, we proceed, and we welcome them on board on social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, both. Both are Dr. Rajka. I'm happy to provide those links. And your doc is even doing reels these days, so you can teach an old dog new tricks.
That's amazing. And Dr. Rajka, thank you so much. You're pretty awesome. You're very awesome. I am so glad we had this conversation, and I hope to see you again on the show.
Yeah, I'd be delighted to come back.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, listeners. Remember that nutrition is key. You need to eat enough protein, have a diverse diet, and test, don't guess. This is Orion. Until next time, have a stellar life.